third and final theme, which is role and involvement of the school leadership team in lesson study. Our presenters are Tanya Gauci-Fenek, Claudette Zara Conti, Emma Paris, and Daniel Carbona Smith. Tanya, Claudette, Emma, and Daniel are all members of the leadership team of their school. In their presentations, they will delve into the role and involvement that school leadership team members can have in lesson study, and the extent to which this can lead to making lesson study a sustainable initiative. So I welcome Tanya as our first presenter. Tanya, I think you need to unmute.
Hi, sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya. I am my role here. I'm an assistant head in an independent school. I am lucky to have Simone as part of my team. So in this lesson study, I was not leading the lesson study itself, but I was supporting her. Presently, I'm leading for the Leadership Masters together with Simone. And I had one prior experience in lesson study where I was leading it. So I see my role in this lesson study as a co-leader, sort of. I mean, Simone was leading it, but I was there especially as a support for her. So I was supporting her in, for example, timetabling, finding the space where the team can meet, providing replacements for other teachers to be relieved from their lessons so they can join her, providing the space, and so on. I saw myself also as a guide through the lesson study because Simone was still learning about the lesson study, whereas I already went through that process, and the other members chosen did not have an idea of what a lesson study entails. So I was sort of leading them to what should be done next. So, studying and finding the problem that we want, and then we want to sort of focus on, and then going into the researching through various platforms, through various literature, planning it, keeping our objectives there, implementing it, and then obviously seeing, evaluating it through the debriefing, how it went on. I saw myself also as the person who sort of keeps the focus on student learning. So the teachers were very excited, as Simone said, and sometimes they would go off a tangent and they would, for example, focus more on the end product. So, how do we see the task being presented? Whilst it was my role sort of to pull them back and say, listen, what is our focus here? The focus is the student learner, the student learning, not as such how we're going to present the best task, how the task that is more sort of flowery in a way, that makes us look good. So I felt that one of my roles was to keep us on the road of, are the students learning? Are we improving their achievements? So the challenges that I faced, the first and biggest, I think, challenge for me was stepping back. So me being a person who loves being involved, I felt the need to sort of bounce right into the discussion. I don't think that's the way to go. Let's move a bit back. But for me to step back and let Simone lead and the others contribute was difficult for me. So that was one of my biggest challenges, because I think that as a support for Simone, I needed to let her go down that road, encounter difficulties, and then sort of see if she had to go back, retract, or find another way, instead of giving her the solution. Sort of, I had to be more of a coach than a rescuer in a way. Another challenge was to keep the tasks that we choose open-ended. In their enthusiasm, the members were going for very close-ended tasks. So that was another challenge, sort of to keep the tasks as open-ended as possible. Again, the smart choice of activities. We wanted to do a lot. Everyone wanted to add that task because it's interesting. That one was very engaging. But at the end of the day, you have only 40 minutes to deliver this lesson, and we had to be very, very selective. So we had to be smart in our choices. Another challenge that we had was, well, that I felt, was acknowledging all the team's contribution. So everyone was so enthusiastic. They wanted to give their part, but sometimes they went off to a tangent. And you, as an SLT, would say, right now, we're really diverging off the topic. So there was a balance here to keep. Let the team, all the team members participate, and then at a point, bring them back to the focus of the meeting. Time, as Simone said, was an issue. So as she says, we had scheduled all our meetings, but things cropped up. Me being an assistant head, sometimes things happen in school that require your presence, and there were times when I went in the middle of the meeting. So that was an issue for them. There were times when other teachers or members that were part of that group needed to be called into an IEP, for example, or they had to participate in a specialist lesson because of their student. So the team was not there always. So we were missing members in most of our meetings. So the factors that helped me overcome these challenges was reminding myself that I'm not there to rescue Simone as being a leader. I mean, she needed to do her mistakes because those from the mistakes we learn. So I needed more to be of a coach, and this happened not necessarily during the meeting because we needed that time for the team, but then in our one-to-one conversations, sort of, I used to post questions for her, and these used to be moments of reflection for her. Sometimes she would sleep over them and then come back to me and say, maybe if we take this perspective rather than this would help. So I strived with myself to be her coach rather than solving her problems. What helped me also overcome the challenges was redirecting us always to the objectives of the lesson study. What do we want our children to learn? Listening attentively to each member and giving them their importance because it takes courage for every member to contribute. They were taking a risk giving their opinion as well. We did our research very well. We trialed the task, we did them ourselves as if we were the students, so that helped us anticipate the student response. Um, the acceptance, this one, the accepting that that participants have different agendas. So I know that Simone and myself, when we entered into the meeting, our main focus was the lesson study. But there were times when the other participants had a different focus. So, for example, the teacher, she had like a bad lesson before, or an encounter with a student that really emotionally challenged her. That was the topic she wanted to speak about. She needed to vent. And that was something that we had to accept that, yes, sometimes there's the time dedicated to the lesson study, but it may take a different route. And that's okay. And finally, the effective communication. So, even though we didn't meet always as a team, we had a very good platform. We had WhatsApp, and we used to share, the ideas and maybe interventions that we can do, links to platforms, to educational platforms, and I think that really worked well. So as a learning opportunity during the lesson study, the lesson itself, and then during the debriefing, I think what I have learned most is that we deconstruct beliefs when we go into a study such as lesson study. What do I mean by deconstructing beliefs? So, since I am an SLT member, I am not part of that classroom. I do not know the members of that classroom as well. I don't know them really well, these students. So, I have an idea that A is a very talented student and B is a student who needs support. But then once I was there inside the lesson and observing, specifically these children, I could see that A might not be as talented as I thought. So, there are others in the classroom who are talented as well. And maybe this boy, or, we need to challenge him further because he's not showing these talents as much. And someone who I thought needed a lot of support was, in fact, a very valid contributor. And I was not giving her enough credit, for example. I really saw how the sensory approaches that Simone chose for her Latin study were working. She used a lot of visuals, she used the auditory, she used the kinesthetic, and I was lucky enough to be part of that group to really see how well these approaches were helping her to help her children really um, take in the knowledge deeply. And at the end of it, I also learned how, lesson study can empower teachers to become leaders, leaders not only in their classroom, but in the school culture itself. So thank you very much. And I would like to thank Dr. James and Ms. Laura for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, for your interesting presentation. So now we move on and we welcome Claudette Zaraconti to do her presentation.
Hello.
We can hear you, Claudette, very clearly.
Okay, fine. Hi, hello, and good morning to everyone. My name is Claudette Zaraconti. I have been a PE teacher for the last 15 years, and as from this year, I have been appointed head of Department of Physical Education, and this has always been in a state school in Malta. I would like to share with you today my lesson study experience with a focus on leading a lesson study as an office school leader and also working in a new setting. Well, my first experience leading a lesson study taught me that finding a balance between being strong enough to give guidance, but at the same time knowing when to step back to give teachers agency was key. And this is what I would like to talk to you about today. Okay, how as head of my department and lesson study leader at the same time have I managed to achieve this balance? Well, considering my situation, this balance came quite naturally to me. It came automatically. And why is this? Well, let me explain a few things. First of all, like I already said, I am a newly appointed middle leader. So I am new to the role as head of department. I am new to the level because for 15 years teaching PE, I always taught in a primary school. And now I am leading a group of PE teachers in a secondary school. So I was always used to working with younger students, and now I'm in a school of older students. I was new to the school, new to the culture of the school. I was new to the facilities, new to the resources. I had new colleagues, and I was also new to lesson study. So that's practically my sort of background. And to go back now to answering the question of how, as an HOD, I managed to achieve the balance I was talking about earlier, about giving guidance and giving agency to the teachers. I think I achieved this balance by being humble. I was humble enough to make all these admissions I just made here with you today. I also made them with my team. So making these admissions sort of gave messages of they are the experts, I really needed them, and all the time I gave them so much importance. In fact, when we started the lesson planning phase, we worked on their lesson plans, which were tweaked a bit, were adapted, but they were originally their own work. We used their expertise in dealing with this age group. There were moments like, no, let's not do this because it's not appropriate for this age group. And I felt a bit sort of taken aback because I said, oh, my weakness. But like I said, I always worked with younger students, but then they kept me in line. They were willing then, when I gave them this importance, they were willing to take more risks. They never felt judged. So this sort of created a safe space for teachers to express themselves. Okay, so I assume one might say now, after making all those admissions, how could I be credible? How could they see me as their leader, their lesson study facilitator? What was my role in reality? Was being humble my only role? Well, surely not. My role was to bring the team together, first of all, and keep them motivated. I had to evaluate their very useful and previously created or even new material. I had to enrich it, evaluate it. I had to be very familiar with the curriculum because we had a new curriculum. I had to be familiar with new approaches and new pedagogies because we met weekly with our PE education officer and we were constantly discussing how to help teachers align with new ways. I was also working with a content specialist too, because we had a knowledgeable other working with us in our lesson study team. And last but not least, to make myself credible, I was always prepared. Whenever I went to the meetings, I had to make sure I was fully prepared. And yes, I could say then that I made myself credible and they trusted me because of this, because of being humble, but at the same time, I was fully prepared. Okay, so this leadership approach and this approach of the lesson study we took of sort of bring out the ideas from the teacher, work on them and tweak them and then take them back to the table was very much in line with what we were creating for our students in our research lesson, because we were working on a lesson plan of basketball, which employed the very student-centered approach of TGFU. TGFU, very shortly, teaching games for understanding, in physical education is an approach which takes the student from experiencing the game at the very early stages of the unit. So they play the game first, then they work on skills, they learn the skills, and immediately go back to the game, to practicing the game again. So students play the game to learn the game. They don't just repetitively learn isolated skills and never put them into practice and connect to the game. And on the same lines, I went from planning with the teachers first to working on some details and then going back to the teachers to elaborate further. Just like TGFU strives from moving away from the teacher-led approach of teaching continuous skills through drills and never get to play the game, in the same way, leaders need to give space to the teachers. We need to let them work. It's what teachers are good at, after all. Yes, okay. A lesson study leader needs to orchestrate everything, orchestrate all the input. That is important, but let the teachers play their game. I wanted to end my presentation on that very important note. That's my input for today. I hope my perspective was insightful for you all, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudette. I particularly like the parallelism that you managed to create between teachers' engagement and lesson study and the TGFU approach in your lessons. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we move on to our third presenter, and for this theme was Emma Paris to do her presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can you let me know if it's showing full screen? Fantastic.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the role and involvement of SLT in lesson study. It's a pleasure to be part of this seminar today, and participating and leading a lesson study has been an extremely incredible learning experience. To give you all some context, my school is an independent primary school and one which follows a distributed leadership model. My role is that of senior middle leader for teaching and learning, which is similar to a curriculum leader in possibly in your schools. Being part of the leadership team did prove to be beneficial in this endeavor, primarily because it allowed me to overcome some potential logistical issues, such as finding a suitable time and space to meet with team members, as well as having some access to resources such as human resources, which I'll speak about later. It may be the case that teachers and staff members do feel obliged to participate when being approached by a leader. And this is not necessarily positive, because you do want potential members to accept to participate because they are interested and see the value in such collaboration. So I think it's very important that those approached do not feel pressured to accept, and that what is expected of them, especially in terms of time, because we all know that that is often, an issue, is communicated beforehand. And in my case, the fact that I was heavily pregnant when I asked my colleagues to participate probably also influenced their decision to accept my invitation. So at first I thought that it might be challenging to shift roles from my usual role to that of lesson study lead, since I am usually very involved in planning together with the teachers as well as the subject coordinators. I was, initially very enthusiastic to share my ideas when we first started planning our lesson. And, like Tanya, I did find it hard to hold back. However, in order to help me contain my excitement, after the first planning meeting, I decided that in subsequent meetings, as well as in the post-lesson discussion, I would take it upon myself to take minutes, and this would help me engage more in active listening. And this also served as very good practice for when I needed to adopt the role of observer during the research lesson. I was very pleased, as were my team, with the outcome of the lesson. I believe it was positive because of the different perspectives involved in the planning of the lesson. By having the team composed of teachers of the cohort that would participate in this research lesson, we could use their knowledge of the pupils in that cohort and of their areas of difficulty and areas in which they needed to grow. We also had the learning support educator involved. However, whilst this member could not attend the planning meetings, by upholding the principles of universal design and asking the learning support educator to review our plan, our finalized lesson plan, we could make sure that it was accessible for all. By having subject coordinators involved, it was possible to really take on the strategies and apply these to other lessons. as well, and ensure that in subsequent scholastic years, we would continue to develop this lesson and use the strategies in others. And by having members of SLT involved, we could really make sure that the school values were upheld throughout and that the strategies used were in line with the overall school vision. As well, once again, to help with the logistic issues. So by having lesson study team members who were class teachers be replaced so that they could partake in the observation, and also by replacing the learning support educator to contribute to the post-lesson discussion. Great, so I'll show you here. So as the lesson study phases progressed, I came to realize that rather than a change in roles, being lesson study lead was a reminder of the leadership qualities which I value. And it was yet another opportunity to put these values into practice. Primarily that of being an active listener and a leader who empowers their team members by creating a safe space for them to share and learn from each other, and therefore to develop professionally in a collaborative manner. Among the multitude of benefits offered by lesson study, this experience was extremely valuable because it kept teaching and learning at the center in a very practical way. It valued teachers as the experts that they are, and it provided the opportunity for a professional learning community to develop. I think it's these benefits which make lesson study very relevant, and the outcome of this form of professional development long-lasting, you know, with the lesson plan as well being a manifestation of this. The next steps going forward will be trying to optimize the gains of this experience and pave the way for more of these experiences to take place. I think that this can be done by SLT providing the platform for the lesson study team members to share their experience by either presenting their report, their lesson study report, you know, in a professional learning day or through maybe a seminar like this, and to disseminate the researched teaching strategies so that these can be used by other teachers, other teams, and for other learning areas as well. I think SLT should also offer the opportunity to all staff to participate in future lesson studies. And I think what would be very beneficial is trying to encourage representatives from the different teams to participate, whether these be the creative arts teams, learning support educators, as well as members from the SLT. Okay. I think it's also very important that we celebrate the successes. And once staff are given the opportunity to express their interest, the SLT must, you know, support in terms of logistics. And, you know, one way that this could be done is if, as SLT, you know who is interested in taking, you take note of who is interested in taking part in lesson study at the start of the year. You can, you know, give the opportunity for teachers to form their teams so that then timetable issues can be taken into consideration, you know, before timetables are finalized. And I think most importantly is that, you know, as leaders lead by example and should definitely, you know, find the opportunity to be part of upcoming lesson studies so that they will really ensure that their presence and their support is felt. I think that this is really the way that we can truly foster a culture of learning in our schools and cultivate a professional learning community. So I thank you all, and I welcome any questions in the Q&A part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. And we welcome now Daniel Caruana-Smith for his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. Let me just share screen. Microphone off, something. No. It says host participant has disabled the participant screen sharing.
Can
I
you check
think I
now?
need.
Can you check now again?
Yes, okay, I can now. Thank you. Okay, is that showing correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, so for my lesson study, the focus was mainly on the role of and involvement of the SLT. In our case, my scenario is a private independent school, and the lesson being studied was in the senior school. It is the topic of hurricanes in geography. We picked this topic in particular because it is known to be quite a challenging one for students. And what was, I think, interesting in my case was that almost all the participants were SLT members, or almost all of them. It was a very, very different dynamic given the roles of leadership every individual held, and what they could bring to the table. To introduce the team, our knowledgeable expert was the headmaster of the college, Mr. Mackenberg. He joined to give in both his expertise in the field of sciences, as well as obviously a very, very experienced leader within the school. We also had our resident head of humanities at the college, Mr. Pellicano. He is an expert in geography as well as the humanities and archaeology, and has conducted previous lesson observations internally related to the subject. And he was also our lead observer during the actual lesson study session. Obviously, there was myself on the team. Apart from teaching the geography option students, I'm also the head of the senior school. We had the head of our sixth form joining the team as well. He is a physics teacher by profession, but of course also has experience in leadership. And Ms. Borch, who is an academic and curriculum coordinator. So obviously she was chosen to help in terms of the curriculum and the content being delivered. So quite a varied team, everyone in leadership, everyone with quite a lot of experience and a lot to bring to the table. Now, in terms of the roles themselves, our headmaster, we assigned the role of knowledgeable expert. Mr. Mackenberg found time to attend all our meetings held. He gave his feedback via email, even post meetings, anything that he could add. He was also present for the observation itself and for the post-observation discussion. Mr. Pellicano helped out with the actual geographic expertise. It was very, very helpful to have two geography teachers tackling the same issue, which is the delivery of a challenging topic in this case. Mr. Pellicano gave very content-specific feedback and shared his methods of teaching the topic. And he was also the main or the lead observer during the lesson. I contributed, of course, to leading the lesson study, to the actual formulation of the lesson, logistics, coordinating meetings, and I also delivered the lesson. Mr. Galia gave a very, very insightful insight from a scientific point of view and a practical point of view, since he's more versed with practical sessions and lab sessions in this case, which was very, very influential because it gave a different slant to the topic. And Ms. Borch primarily ensure that everything we discussed and all the ideas we threw out during our meetings aligned with the curriculum and what ultimately we are accountable for teaching. Looking back at the experience, what do I feel was brought to the table? What can be shared? Well, the advantages of having such a diverse team of professionals. First of all, it was very, very apparent there was a lot of experience brought to the table and a lot of different perspectives. We adopted a multidisciplinary approach where it was not about the teaching of geography. We included physics, science, experiences which are cross-curricular that were brought into it. Perspectives from different forms, levels of leadership were shared. So we were looking at this lesson study, not just from the teacher's level, but also from a senior leadership team level of how this can be implemented as a whole school approach, not just a one-off event in a classroom. And something that was very surprising was how approaches which we considered incompatible or maybe not as conducive. I'm thinking of, for example, using a textbook, actually gelled very, very well when put in context with other methods such as the inquiry approach. Potential pitfalls, so things to sort of look out for when leading such a lesson study. Well, when you have a strong leadership team, getting views to align may be a challenge. So you need to have the right people on board who can come to compromises in some cases. Timetabling and logistics, as I'm sure everyone in this meeting can appreciate, they are a challenge. They are definitely a challenge, especially when you have people who are constantly on the go or leading a department. Different means of communication have to be put into play. So we have the timetabled meetings, and I think it's important to have the physical face-to-face meetings. However, emails had to be put into play, sometimes informal meetings, and then we just brief everyone. You need to use, I think, in today's schools, all the means of technology available to you. And the roles have to be reconsidered for the duration of study. So in this case, I adopted the role of lesson study leader, despite the fact that one of the people on my team was the headmaster. That has to also be kept into consideration. So what can I give as sort of considerations when doing this kind of lesson study with SLT members? I'd suggest anyone embarking on such a study seek a team of SLT members and teachers with different areas of expertise. That is definitely going to add more to the experience. Never close off or dismiss ideas. We all have to remain open to different approaches, even if it's different, if it's unconventional. It's surprising how sometimes things work, and I think that is where we gain the most experience. Considering how suitable the inclusion of SLT members is vis-a-vis encouraging teachers, this is, I think, where I would self-critique here, that we had such a strong leadership team that maybe teachers feel daunted to actually join the team. It's not the case. Anyone can embark in lesson study. There is no such thing as requiring a certain previous experience. Experience and knowledge are relative. Everyone should try this and everyone can go for this. I think it's very, very important to appoint a chair during meetings, because when you have such a varied team, it's important to have someone to regroup the whole team. And in our experience, something that we found that helped was rotating the chair, so having a different person chair every meeting. When selecting the team, ensure all members are motivated and prepared to make time to discuss, even if virtually. It's essential to have the concept snowball and actually build enthusiasm as you go along. And I think the most important thing, which is a factor that counts for leadership in general, would be that when bringing on members to the team, you are open, honest, and very clear with your intentions, so that everyone is on the same page and everyone knows what the common vision and the common goal is. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Tanya. And thanks also to Claudette for sharing your experiences and your insights within this theme of, role and involvement of the senior leadership team in lesson study. We can take a couple of questions. I think there are some interesting insights that have been shared by Tanya, for example, who was a co-leader with her group. So, to what extent did she feel that she could intervene or not intervene during her lesson study, for example? With Claudette, I think I really liked the fact that she was somehow an outsider to a team she was really getting to know, because she was in her very first few months of getting to know this team, working in the secondary while her prior experience was in the primary. I think Emma then shared with us how she could help, her members, her team, to own lesson study and get through it, even if you encounter difficult times at times. And finally, Daniel, I think you've embarked on a lesson study which is quite unique in a sense. I've only been involved once with such a lesson study where you have different leaders working together, and that could be quite complex, but then again, quite interesting and enriching. So thanks for sharing some great insights in your concluding slides. Any questions? I'm not sure whether there were any questions in the chat on this. No, Shirley asked a very, very interesting question, because during these presentations, and I think I myself did this as well, we've used lesson study leader, lesson study facilitator, probably interchangeably. And Shirley was rightly so asking whether we mean the same thing or maybe we mean different things with the leader and facilitator.